Hey guys, what is going on? Sharp thinking here. So I wanted to do a video today. I'm gonna light this candle because I like candles. I wanted to do a video today on comparing the Benchmade Anthem and the Reeve Sebenza 21. Yes, I'm aware that the 31 has come out. Not readily available at this time, and I don't own one. So I feel like most people are like already familiar with the 21, and most people are aware that the Anthem exists. So let's talk about it. Very similar knives in terms of just overall. If you were to compare them on, just going down a list. Titanium handles, pretty decent steel blades, S35VN and 20CV. You have pretty much the same price. The standard Sebenza 21s are $425. I think the micarta might be like $525, or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I know that these are $425 new. Or, actually, they might be more. No. That's MSRP. MSRP on these is about 500. But new on like Blade HQ, they are about 425. The standard one is just like a flat scale. This still is not a standard one. It would just be a flat titanium scale. But yeah, just plain Jane Sebenza 21 versus this. I think that the titanium with the micarta has more in common than the carbon fiber one. So that's why I'm using this guy. So getting into it, we have a lot of similarities here. So we have a 3.6 inch blade, a 3.5 inch blade. In use, I think it's a pretty negligible difference. We have a drop point for both of these, and both of them actually have a crowned spine. So what that is where they knock the corners off the spine, and really just makes the knife feel super high quality. This one's a little less crowned. You can see it has more of an edge than the Sebenza, but they are both crowned nonetheless. So comparing the blade grind, this is a hollow grind. I think most people are familiar with that. Really well done. Comes to a nice thin edge. Probably about 20 thousandths if I had to guess. Maybe a little bit under. Here, let me take a look here. So most Spydercos are about 20. Yeah, I'd say that's about the same. So hollow ground comes to a nice thin edge. The advantages of this blade shape or blade grind over the flat grind that the Anthem has is you can sharpen a lot of the blade off. And with this one, which has been used and abused, as you can see, still 20 thousandths behind the edge, which is huge. So for those of you that sharpen and use your knives all the time, this might be, important to you. I'm not saying it, people that don't use their knives like flat grinds, because that's just not the case. But yeah, for me, it's a big deal. I love it. I think it's a fantastic pro for this knife. This knife has a flat grind. Blade stock, forgot to compare those. Looks to be about the same. So, same stock. That guy at the bottom. This guy's flat ground. It is fairly thin. I know some people say that these are thicker than they expected, but I think that this might also be 20 thousandths behind the edge. A little bit more narrow of a blade. which for EDC is sometimes a nice thing. Having a wide blade can kind of make certain cuts a little bit more tricky. S35VN from Chris Reeve, really, really, really good stuff. It sharpens up like nothing else. It's some of the best S35VN I've ever experienced. It beats out ZT for sure. It beats out Hinderer, Spyderco, Southern Grind. I think I had S35VN from them, and it beats out Riot. So that Chavez Ultramar. So beats out Hinderer, like I said. Hinderer does do a good job though. So does Riot. They do a really nice job, which is surprising because a lot of Chinese companies don't do a great job. Now this has 20 CV. On paper, that's going to be a better steel in terms of composition. I can tell you that I'm not going to name them, but if you want to DM me on Instagram and discuss it, somebody had a blade come up at 57 on the Rockwell for their Anthem. Depending on what year you get of the 21, it's either going to be 59 or 60. On the card, it'll say 58 to 59. From what I've seen from Rockwell testing, it comes out the higher number most of the time. And that's verified by Neuro Knives, Super Steel Steve. I think both of their Sebenzas have turned out to be the higher of the two numbers listed on the card that these knives come with. Moving down to the thumb stud. Well, first off, before I go into that, both of these guys have great sharpening choils. The Sebenza has a huge one, which isn't 100% necessary. It's nice though. And this has a regular sharpening choil. So thumb studs, I actually really like the Anthem thumb studs. I think they do a great job. One advantage to the Anthem is you can deploy it with both hands. Now, I am right-handed, so of course I carry the knife set up for right hand carry. But if you wanted to, you wouldn't have to buy a separate model for left-hand carry. Sebenza, a little bit different of a story. I think a lot of people complain about this, but they don't even put a thumb stud on the other side. They do make double lugs, but this really isn't a knife. Like, I can actuate most knives with my offhand. Obviously, I can't deploy this one, with my left hand, but I can close it pretty easily. So maybe if you got a double lug, it would be easier, but you still wouldn't be able to carry it left-handed. So I don't know. And this thumb stud isn't my favorite. I know Chris Reeve is capable of better thumb studs, like on the Zon. These are much, much better. So easy to deploy. Let's see, can I do it? Yeah, left hand too. And this is a knife that's notoriously hard to open. So moving down to the handle, I guess we'll talk about the pivot hardware. Chris Reeve wins. The hardware is just nicer. You don't have to Loctite anything here. I have not put Loctite on either one of these knives since getting them, and I play with this guy all day long. Such a smooth knife. And I've had this for about 2 months. But with this, I do Loctite the pivot. It is a free spinning pivot, which kind of sucks. There's no Loctite, can't talk. There's no Loctite on the pivot right now. And it is actually, it comes loose about once every 2 or 3 weeks. To the point where I have side to side. Nothing now. It's been about a week since I've adjusted it at all, and it's fine. But it's been I actually just got this knife, so I can really only speak on this one. It's been 2 months, so I got it, tightened the pivot down all the way, and it's perfect, which is how Chris Reeves are supposed to be. All right, so hardware is a clear win for the Chris Reeve. Now let's talk about handle. So both are titanium. The Benchmade is an integral. Very, very well done, I have to say. I really love the way that they did the axis lock in this. Let's see, do I have a light? So you can see it's a coil spring in there. It's kind of like the Spyderco ball lock, but mixed with the more efficient axis lock style. I feel like most people prefer the axis lock in terms of actuation and just playing with it. But the ball lock has always been touted as a little bit more reliable because the Omega springs that Benchmade uses in most of their axis locks have a tendency to break. So I guess we'll talk about lock. Lock strength on this guy is arguably stronger in terms of negative force put on the spine of the knife. That is good for some people. It depends what you use your knife for. I always like liner locks. I love, how simple they are to use. Really, a frame lock is, I feel, more reliable and more simple than an axis lock or any sort of lock similar to an axis lock. So I'm going to call that one a tie just because it's preference. Really, it's going to be a subjective thing. I like liner locks over a frame lock. Most people like frame locks over liner lock. I don't know. It's just whatever you like more. That's going to be clearly your preference. Now I'm getting lost in my thought. So let's just move on. Yeah, this is not an integral. It's got two little pins or standoffs. So that's a standoff. That's actually the stop pin that the blade stops against. The Anthem does not have a stop pin. It just stops against that little flat portion on the handle. Let's see. I really like this handle. I think the pattern looks really nice. It's a super photogenic knife. This is also a really nice handle. I think ergos, and I hate to say it, this knife is super thin, and thin knives usually don't have amazing ergos. However, when you do a lock bar cut like that, so it's super easy for me to disengage the lock bar purposefully. When you cut out this much of the frame, I feel like it fucks up ergos a little bit. So honestly, I have to say I think the Anthem has a little bit better ergos. Yeah, I mean, I've used this knife quite a bit. I've cut with it a ton. The standard Sebenza 21, I should move that. This guy is a little bit thinner in the hand, so it's not quite as hand filling. But if you get the micarta inlay version, there should be really no problems. These two knives are very different in terms of ergonomics. So once you get these inlays, it almost feels like a contoured Sebenza a little bit. But moving on, I'm going to have to give it to the Anthem just by a little tiny bit. Because if you're really bearing down on the knife, it's just right here. is really nice. In terms of like traction stuff, I'm probably gonna give it to the Sebenza. Um, that's just with this and with this, like the inlays or just the plain. I've handled the plain titanium Sebenza. It's perfectly fine. Super nice traction on it. In terms of it not being like, for those of you familiar with the Benchmade 490 Arcane, that knife has no traction. These all have perfect traction for EDC. So if you wanted to cut hard with it, it wouldn't just fly out of your hand. Moving on to pocket clip. So Benchmade went with their 3D machine penis clip, and Reeve went with their standard, tried and true, just spring titanium clip. I really, really like Reeve's titanium clip. It's got like the double retention, kind of like the Microtech SOCOM. I mean, for me, it's this clip all the way. For those of you guys that are into these 3D machine clips, you're probably going to like that one more. It's a really well done clip. I don't have any complaints about it. Mine has not bent out at all. I've carried this knife all over the place, even on a horse farm while I was helping out, and it got caught on stuff and just bent back. It never really bent out to where I needed to take the knife apart and fix it. What else? Let's see. I guess we'll look at the knives closed. So closed, you would think that the Anthem would be thinner, but it actually is a little bit thicker. Not by much, but it is a little bit. Overall thickness, the Anthem is thinner. Yep. So yeah, so far for me, in terms of fit and finish, and let's just get into that. This still feels like a Benchmade, which that's not an insult to Benchmade, but it still feels like, it's just like if I picked this up and it had no labels or anything, I'd be like, this feels like a Benchmade. Regardless, say the axis lock wasn't a Benchmade thing, it just feels like any other Benchmade. Sure, it's super special. The machining is impeccable. Great, I mean, great blade shape. Super functional design. But in terms of quality, the Reeve is just on another level. Like, even going back to the screws just incredible screws. I'm a big screw guy. Like, I love deep screws. I love like just high quality like pivot wear, like Strider and Hinder, all them. The Reeve, for those of you that haven't handled them, by the way, and this is an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people talk about. This knife will, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I am always so unenthused taking a Reeve out of the box. I just feel like, oh, like whatever. It's never like a super insane moment to me. Like, even when I got my first one, I was like, oh, that's cool, whatever. With Microtech SOCOMs, like, it's so, I don't know. It's just something about Reeve is just kind of boring, in my opinion. I love the knives, and I'm a huge Reeve fan. I'm also a huge Benchmade fan. But they're just kind of, you have to really use them in order to be able to appreciate them. What else? I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed. In terms of, playing around, which I usually don't cover, the Benchmade's going to win. It's way more fidgety, which brings me to my next point. For hard use, this knife has ball bearings. They have dented the titanium frame on this Anthem from prying. It is let's see. I don't know which side my mic is on. You can, I don't know if you could hear that, but there are little dents from me over tightening the pivot. That will happen if you pry with the knife as well. I know you're not supposed to pry with a knife, but sometimes life happens. These Chris Reeve Sebenzas have gigantic washer systems. They're much, much, much stronger in terms of, you know, how long they last and also how much force they can take in terms of prying. All in all, I think that these knives, while they are super comparable, they're for completely different people. I really do think that. I can appreciate both knives because they're so similar that if you like one, you'll like the other. You're going to have a preference. So if you already like the Sebenza, I can promise you if you pick this guy up and use it, you'll like it. And same goes with this. If you have this knife, I would almost guarantee you that if you got a Chris Reeve Sebenza, you'd love it because the designs are so similar. But if you're in it to just play with a knife, this is going to be your go-to. If you're in it for crazy titanium machining, you want the next best blade steel, and you want, 3D machine clip, ball bearings, this is your knife. A lot of people have the discussion where they bring up, is a Chris Reeve still worth it? It's only S35VN, which is completely ridiculous. I think Chris Reeve does the best job with S35VN, and Chris Reeve designed that steel. This is going to be more of a user. I know it's crazy to think about, but this is a $425 or $525 user beater. I think that's where you're going to find most of your joy with these knives, is getting those, snail trails on the titanium. These are extremely beautiful, but in hand, they just don't have the same level of confidence and strength, and I don't know. I'm getting way too into this, but yeah. Definitely, if you already have one, you should check the other out. If you don't like it, sell it, I guess. But yeah, I just wanted to compare the two knives because a couple people have DM'd me asking me to do it. So those of you that have, this video is for you. And yeah, that's all I got. It's about 3 a.m. here, so I'm going to hit the hay, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching.